Doug Lloyd.
How are you, sir?
It's good to see you. Eaton County Prosecutor.
Yes, I am.
Been a prosecutor for, 12 years? The head prosecutor?
The head prosecutor almost 13 years now.
Wow. And then before that, you were an assistant?
I was. Yes.
How long were you an assistant prosecutor?
Started out in Jackson. I was an assistant prosecutor in 96. Then I came up to Eaton County where my wife, Mina, who you know, and I lived and still live, and started in early 2000 with Jeff Sauter.
So we're going to unpack some of that, but that's a lot of years in the county, and you've seen a lot go on, a lot of changes over the years, and got a lot going on, really. I mean, both personally and professionally, and 2 kids, and married to a prosecutor. So let's start from the beginning. You were born and raised in Las Vegas.
I was. Yeah, that's always a shock, and that's a great talking point, right? When you're looking to find something to talk to somebody about, you can just say, hey, I was born and raised in Vegas, and that usually floors them for a second. And then there's always the questions that go with it. Were you spending all your time in the gambling halls, as a kid?
Most people don't, when they go to Vegas, they're on the Strip, right? They don't necessarily drive around or go to the neighborhoods or do anything like that. It's not like if you're in Charlevoix and you drive around just to see the houses and what's going on, or any other city up north.
Right. I mean, that's the big difference, is that, you fly in for those 3 days, you have fun, you fly out, and you never leave the Strip. And for me, growing up, Vegas is a big bowl, and the Strip's right in the middle of it. So once you get outside that Strip, I always tell people that it doesn't look any different than the town you live in, whether it's Lansing or a suburb of Detroit. Right. It's just a normal-looking city. Really, the only difference was that I remember as a kid, we had 7-Elevens on every corner. That was the thing. And in the 7-Eleven, there would always be 2 slot machines and a poker machine. That's really, if you walked into a 7-Eleven today out here in Michigan, the only difference you're going to see is there won't be those slot machines there.
Exactly. What, no siblings?
No siblings, only child. My parents weren't supposed to have kids, and bam, I screwed up their life, and here I was.
There you go. And growing up in Las Vegas and good looking, how tall are you?
Well, I used to think I was like 6'3", 6'4", but getting older, I keep shrinking, so I'm probably down to 6'2" now.
It's blonde hair, always good-looking guy. I mean, I remember the first time I saw you at Cooley, and I thought, who the fuck is this guy? I should have gone to Hollywood, I thought. I mean, it just didn't fit into the Lansing crowd.
Well, no, I thought I fit in well. I mean, Lansing I connected with, almost immediately, because I always came out as more, just kind of calm, reserved, not really reserved, but just calm, laid back a little bit. Right. And Lansing fit right into that groove for me.
That's great. So you played sports in high school?
I did. I mean, I had a real different life, right? I mean, my dad was a computer engineer, worked for a government subcontractor that did things at the test site, Area 51.
Right.
And my mom was a social worker, so they really wanted me to have, just the overall things of life. So, they got me into scouting. My dad said before I could get my wheels, I had to get my wings. So I got my Eagle Scout. Wow. I played sports. I played football. And I did all those things. My family was really broken up across the country. So my mom's family was from Arkansas, and my dad's family was from Idaho. And they came down to Vegas in the 60s, and they met and got married and stayed there. So I spent summers in Idaho with my grandparents, and the other part of the summer in Arkansas with my grandparents. So I was just,
They call it the Ho, right? Idaho,
yeah. They never called it that to me, but yeah, that's a term that gets used for it.
Where you weren't at Coeur d'Alene, were you?
No, I was in Idaho Falls. Idaho
Falls. Yeah, it's pretty country up there.
Oh, it's wonderful country. I mean, it's It's similar to Michigan, but different. They got mountains for one thing, and they're growing more potatoes, than anything else. But you still have that agriculture that when we get out into rural Michigan.
When I first got married, we drove across the country from Lansing to Seattle and Seattle down to L.A. and L.A. back, and it was kind of a late honeymoon. And one of the best spots, obviously a lot of great spots on the way, but one of the best spots I'll never forget was Coeur d'Alene. It was just like I couldn't believe it.
Oh yeah, just beautiful country out there.
So obviously that'd be good for your Eagle Scout and whatever you learned in that, because I was never a scout, but all that kind of thing. And then in high school, what high school did you graduate from?
I graduated from Bonanza High School, the Bonanza Bengals.
There you go.
One of the furthest schools out back in 1984 when I graduated high school. And now that city's grown so much that there's so many more high schools. But it was different, right? Because, my kids growing up in Grand Ledge and playing football for Grand Ledge, they traveled to Brighton, Howe, Grand Rapids. We had 9 schools right there in the valley, even
Grand
back
Ledge
in the 80s.
was a big school. How big was your high school?
It was similar to Grand Ledge, so it was about 2,400 kids, 3,000 kids. Yeah,
that's big. And you decide not to leave Vegas and to go to UNLV.
Right. Yeah. UNLV was kind of a commuter school at that time. It's changed now, but I was young, I was working, and so I decided, I'd go to UNLV and try to figure out what I wanted to do with my life.
Did they have dorms?
They had like 2 sets of dorms, and most of those dorms were for the athletes. And so everybody else just, kind of did what second-year MSUs did, right? They all got apartments. Yes.
And is that what you did?
That's what I did.
So, your parents probably made a good living, but not, working for the government. You're not, or social work. You're not, you're not a trust fund kid. I mean, maybe your grandparents or something, but you're working and you go to the local college, right?
Correct.
I mean, and UNLV, although on TV, it was bigger than life because of Larry Johnson and the Running Rebels and the basketball coach. But most people don't realize it probably wasn't a very big school.
No, I mean, it was decent size. It was spread out, as far as, right down there off the strip.
Right.
And so, but yeah, it was
not like Michigan State, 40,000.
No, not at all. I mean, there was probably, 15, 20,000 kids at the school.
And you're going to study what?
Well, I went in originally, I was going to study business. I'll tell you, my father said that, you should go into hotel management. Of course, I was young, so I'm not listening to my father. If I were to go back, I probably would have gone into hotel management, seeing Vegas today, what it looked like back then. But I ended up in criminal justice and psychology because that just kind of piqued my interest at that time. And so, funny enough, I was in with a lot of the athletes that, were doing school.
We see them on TV when they do their picture and what they're studying, and there's a lot of them that study communications and criminal justice and psychology.
Right, exactly. Yes, and so I went with that, and I wasn't sure what I wanted to do, with my life. I interned with a bankruptcy trustee. I did an internship with the Secret Service, and so I was doing different things that I was just trying to figure out my way.
Because of your criminal justice background, you were able to get in with Secret Service?
I was. Well, between that and one of my aunts happened to work at the bankruptcy court, which was right next door to the Secret Service, and she had friends, and, it's always good to have friends, right? And so I managed to get an internship there for the summer.
So what era are we talking? What years are we talking about?
Wow, we're talking 84 to 88 at that time.
Was that UNLV?
Yeah, that was the time I was at UNLV.
So I was at Michigan State from 83 to 87, and we talked yesterday. And I don't know a ton of people from Vegas, but I'm obviously familiar with Blake Ezor.
Right.
And he was here later though.
Right. Yeah, he went to Bishop Gorman, which was the only private Catholic school in Vegas at that time. and they're still there. You'll see them. Actually, they're one of the ones that do the high school, Friday nights on ESPN.
Right. Yeah.
But they moved out from where they were.
He was pretty wild when he was here, and so you get that image.
Sure.
Of what somebody from Vegas is, and you're the exact opposite of that, I think.
Yeah, no, I mean, Blake was a great player, right? But there were moments in my time that I was just like, come on, man. Everybody's mentioning you're from Vegas. Can you help a brother out and not do this stupid stuff?
Right. So you graduate in 1988, and, there's at least, you don't have a lot of connections to the law other than this bankruptcy internship or job, right?
Right. I mean, the only other thing is that I had friends. One of them, one of my good friends ended up being a judge out in Vegas. His dad was an attorney, and I had known them growing up. So I got to see, what it looked like to go to work and put on a suit and a tie every day and actually go to work like that. So I saw that, and, I got to obviously interact with them. But no, I didn't have the connections of just an attorney in the household that you got to hear the stories of. I know you talk about the stories, of just hearing your dad, and just being around your dad. And my kids, I think, get that now. Right. But, I didn't have that, starting out.
And I imagine there were people in the Secret Service that were lawyers.
There were. They were different things because, there's really the two avenues there, right? Every time that Reagan would come into Vegas, then they all of a sudden became presidential detail. But otherwise, they were investigating bad checks and, fake money and all that.
Money laundering.
Right.
So, you graduate, and what do you do?
Well, there's a funny thing that my wife Mina reminded me of last night. In between me graduating college and going to law school, I actually got called for jury duty.
Oh, really?
And I sat on a co-defendant homicide case.
Through the whole case?
Through the whole case. So wow. I'm 22, 23 years old. I asked the lawyers afterwards, the lawyers get to go in there and talk. I'm like, why'd you keep me? And they were like, well, criminal justice psychology, maybe you'd be more liberal.
Defense lawyers.
Yes, the defense lawyers, because we found the guys guilty. And that's the thing that I try to bestow on my attorneys now is that these cases that these jurors have to sit on, they're going to remember them in the rest of their lives because I could still give you the facts of that case and remember sitting in that courtroom as a juror and listening to everything going on. And then in Nevada, you actually have a sentencing phase where the jury makes the determination of the sentencing and sitting through
more deliberation,
sitting through that sentencing phase. It's, it's still burned in my mind, even after all these years.
Obviously that would impact anybody, but when not only just watching the trial, but sitting in the box, right?
Right.
I watched my dad a few times and it was impactful. But I never obviously sat in the box, but
sure.
I don't think I could have in this county. But so obviously that was significant. How were the lawyers?
Lawyers were great that I remember, and I think that really had an impact as I'm trying to figure out in my career, what am I going to do? At that time, if you remember, there was so many young people who wanted to go to law school.
Right.
And it was, there were waiting lists to try to get into law school.
Right.
And, but I watched them and I had an opportunity to actually interact with them after the trial was over and just get their thoughts and what they were thinking and what their strategies were of why they did what they did in the trial. And wow, that was really something that, was interesting to me. One of the funny things is that I actually was in debate in high school. So I had done that old Lincoln-Douglas debate, right? Yeah. So watching them interact in the courtroom was like, hey, I think I might enjoy this.
Right, I could do that.
Yeah, well, I didn't know if I could do it, but I thought it was worth a shot.
Right,
and so, all of a sudden I'm sitting there one night and I look at the mail and I get this like 1-page flyer from Cooley that says, hey, apply. So I filled it out and sent it in, going, well, we'll see what happens. I have no idea.
You would have had to take the LSAT, right?
Yeah, I had taken the LSAT because that was one of the things that I was looking at. And I had started applying to the law schools, but the wait lists were just crazy. And so as I'm trying to figure out, okay, am I going to maybe go NCIS? Am I going to go Secret Service? What am I going to do here? And that came, and I filled it out. And I get a letter back that says, this is like the early spring, summer of '89. Says you've been accepted, but, it'll be 1990, spring of 1990 before you get in. So I called him up and I said, look, I don't know what I'll be doing in 1990. If you want me to be a student of yours, then get me in the fall. A couple weeks later, they said, send a check, you're in. And I packed up my truck and a little U-Haul and headed out to Michigan.
I've never been to Lansing. I've never been to Michigan.
I didn't know there was a Lansing. I knew there was an East Lansing because, at that time in Vegas, there were no actual professional teams. And so if you lived in Vegas, you supported a California team, whether it was up north or whether it was down south. My dad always rooted for the Dodgers and the Lakers and the Rams or the Chargers. So Magic Johnson, knew who he was, right? Knew he went to MSU East Lansing. So I said, well, he went there. He's from Michigan, so it can't be that bad.
Find your way.
That's pretty much how it was.
And you went by yourself.
I did.
Can you imagine that today? I mean, the difference back then when you were 22-year-olds got married. They got jobs. There was no such thing as really a gap year, right?
No, not really. No.
I mean, I think I attended the most weddings between the ages of 22 and 20. Everybody was getting married, or I was obviously going to law school then, and same with you. But the idea that you would get in your car by yourself and drive to Lansing and find an apartment, right? Didn't know anybody. It's not like your best friend is going, right?
Oh, no. I knew absolutely no one, and that makes me laugh, right? Because now we just put our phone up there and we type in the address. I had this AAA triptych that divided basically a map that they cut down for you of each section.
State by state.
State by state, and just, went out there and just kind of followed the map and ended up in Lansing.
Right. Had you ever made a trip like that before? Across the country by yourself?
With my grandparents, I had driven, from like Vegas to Arkansas,
So that's a big trip.
Yes, but most of the time, we were going to California, right? We were going down to Malibu or Newport Beach, something like that, with my parents if they wanted to take a vacation. We weren't actually traveling by car really any place.
So when do you start at Cooley? The fall of
'89.
Yeah. So I graduated. So that was my last semester.
So that means you and I, because I can still remember you and I talking in the old Cooley Law Library.
Yeah, I remember meeting you, and I'll tell you, that was my reaction. It was like, I saw you, I was like, you don't fit here. Blonde hair, blue eyes, tall, good-looking guy, in relative good shape, It was like, you're an outlier. A lot of the people that you met were from New York and New Jersey and Pennsylvania.
Correct.
And they were there on a trust fund or whatever, and they were driving BMWs, and you were just this hardworking guy that showed up from Vegas, and we didn't get any West, not a lot of West.
No, there were now. I mean, afterwards, I started seeing a lot more, of them actually bringing in the whole country of law students. But at that time, it really was more of an East Coast school than it was, West Coast.
And so, you grind out law school, and I mean, I know how that experience was, but what was it like for you?
There's certain memories I have, and I bet you remember this, that the first day that you have like all the students show up, and the president of the school, it was Tom Brennan Sr. at that time, right? Stands up and goes, look to your right, look to your left. one of those people aren't going to be there by the end of the first year. Well, guess what? Neither one of them were there by the end of the first year when I got done with the first year. And I think Cooley shaped us because it was cutthroat. It was like, we're going to give you the chance, but you're going to have to earn it. Where a lot of people I talked to who went to these law schools were like, you're our class. We will coddle you through.
Right.
But Cooley was like, stand up and get counted or sit down because we don't care.
And I say this all the time. Everything you need to learn, they teach you in law school. You just don't always learn it. And even if you learned 404B in law school, actually practicing it, actually understanding or any kind of rule of evidence or an objection, they teach you how to make objections, but you actually doing exactly what you're taught in the moment, in front of a judge, on camera, or whatever it is, with the big at stake, it's a lot different. And, that's the thing. Cooley was great for me. And you're right, it was cutthroat. It was sort of a nation, a lot of people that were going to come here, but a lot of people leave. Once they get done, they can't wait to get out of here, but not you.
No, I mean, you've known my wife a lot longer than I've known her.
Yeah.
She tells the story to a lot of people that you two were having coney dogs someplace. And she was going to she graduated from MSU with you, and she was going to go to U of M and become a social worker. And you were like, what are you doing? Come to law school.
Yeah.
And so she ended up coming to law school, and then I ended up meeting her, and maybe I was that outlier because I had a jet ski, because I used to jet ski. Well, I still do, but I had a stand-up jet ski because
the old school ones.
Yes, and and I had brought it out with me because I'd heard Michigan had a couple lakes in it, so I figured while I'm here, I might as well try something new. And so we started hanging out, and we just never stopped hanging out.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
And so you graduate from law school, you meet, girlfriend, future wife,
right,
Mina, and then, you got to get a job.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I had watched those defense attorneys in that trial, and in the 80s, right, you had L.A. Law, and you had all those cool shows.
McBeal and
put the defense attorneys at a really cool position. And so, Mina headed off to Jackson to be an assistant prosecutor down there when we graduated and passed the bar. I was also kind of being wild at that time because not only did I pass the Michigan bar, but I went on to take the Arkansas bar just to honor my grandmother because she was in Arkansas, and then I went and took the Nevada bar because my parents were still out there.
Wow.
I was going to take the California bar, but Mina said, if you take one more bar, we're done. And so I stopped there.
That's stressful. But, I mean, I don't know what's harder, running a marathon or taking one of those bars, but you got to make a significant commitment. And if you passed them, which I assume you did.
I did.
Yeah, I mean, to take 3 bars, that's a lot of work. Now, maybe they get slightly easier and you get a little more confident, but I mean, that's a significant achievement.
Yeah. I was proud to have him. Obviously my family was proud to say that, their son was actually a member of the bar in the state that they lived.
Right.
So that was always great. And I've actually over the years used it a couple times out in Nevada, for family things. So that's been helpful. But I went into private practice because, I wanted to try the defense work. So I was, doing criminal defense, and I was doing the civil stuff.
Court-appointed stuff. Anything that'll come in the door.
Right. As you get to be known, then you all of a sudden you're doing divorces or, whatever other civil suits, and you're handling the criminal stuff. And I did that for, till the end of 95, and I was enjoying it, but I was starting to not enjoy it.
Right.
It just wasn't, I wasn't feeling the fulfillment for me.
It's hard work.
It is. It's
hard work.
It's hard work, but I wasn't I don't know how to say it. I wasn't getting into it. You know, what I was having to represent wasn't what was going with my personal ideals.
So you graduated in, let's say, 92, and you spend almost the better part of another year taking bar exams, right?
And doing court-appointed work and trying to start a law practice and, you know, and all those things. So, yes.
So in 95, you know, you've done it. I mean, you've done it enough to know that, hey, I can beat this drum for a while. And you probably look around. You can look around back then in 95 and you could see guys who had been sort of solo practitioners doing that kind of thing.
Oh,
And where is it going to lead and where are you going to be? And I'll tell you that, in my view, that was maybe the next 10 years, 12 years were some of the toughest times to do that because Cooley didn't get smaller.
No, at that time, Cooley got huge.
Yeah, and it was kicking people out, and there were lawyers all over the place taking drunk drivings for, you know, $1,000, $1,500. I mean, there was a lawyer everywhere.
There was. No, I mean, I was lucky, right? Because I had a group of guys that were maybe 15, 20 years older than me.
Right.
You know, both prosecutors and defense attorneys who for some reason liked me. And so they kind of took me under their wing and they taught me how to be an attorney. Not so much what I had to do in the courtroom. I had to learn that, but how to actually act, how, you know, you're going to fight for, you know, whether it be the people or your client, you know, in the courtroom. But when you're done, you should be able to go have a pop together and actually be, you
Some
know,
of
friends.
those people would have been whom?
Oh, Lee Taylor, Freddie Blackman, Ray Purdy.
Right.
You know, I mean, the funny thing was, here's this mix of prosecutor and defense attorneys, and they're all golfing together on Fridays, and then they would all meet up at Houlihan's on Friday night on the west side.
Right.
And Mina and I were on the west side by then. You know, we've gotten married in 94, and we'd meet him up there, and just, you know, it was just a bunch of friends.
Mina was always a West Sider, right?
Oh, yeah. I still live a mile away from my mother-in-law. So
that's great.
Yeah.
So tell me, your parents didn't want you to come back to Vegas?
Well, I'm sure they would have loved to, right? But they didn't have much that they could say since they, you know, my dad had left Idaho, my mom had left Arkansas. They find each other there. So, you know, we worked it out. You know, I liked it better because I look at the families that have it so tough where, you know, the in-laws on both sides live in town and you're trying to figure out how to make Thanksgiving or Christmas work. You know, when we went to Christmas in Vegas, it was all about...
That's the only place you were.
Yeah, it was all about my parents or, you know, if my parents came out here. Fortunately, you know, they retired, you know, when the boys were pretty young, and they loved to travel. So, you know, you talk about that traveling. They never did it with me, but they would travel from Vegas out to Lansing and then come spend 3 weeks with us a month. Great. And so they'd be out there for Christmas, and we'd have that. But by that point, you know, Mina's parents were retired too, so we'd host the Christmas. So it made it great.
And you decide you're going to do something else around 95-ish?
Yeah, the end of 95, Mina had actually left for Ingham County, and I knew the prosecutor in Jackson County, and he was like, hey, you know, I've seen you in court. Why don't you come try this side of the fence?
And who are you working for in Eaton in Jackson?
Started out Dennis Hurst,
right,
and then John McBain, who's now the circuit court judge. He beat Dennis almost immediately after I get there, and he kept me on, and I kind of moved up. You know, my first year I was district court. Second year I was in Judge Nelson's circuit court, and then the last 2 years I was their arson drug guy. You know, so because that was a time when you talk about 650, right?
Right.
Back in the 90s, there were mandatory minimums.
Right.
So those were really important cases for the defense attorneys to be on. And you saw a lot of retained attorneys because these guys were looking at a lot of years.
Yeah, it was big.
Yeah, truth in sentencing changed all that, where they got rid of mandatory minimums and really changed the guidelines.
The drug cases were, I mean, you know, the tri-counties and and the drug enforcement and the way they were handling those. I mean, we did a ton of that work, and you just prayed that there was some way to negotiate, because often they were hand-to-hand deliveries.
Right. Or you had, that 94 corridor, right? It's Chicago all the way to Detroit, and you would get
the trunk of the car, right?
Trunk of the car all the way up to 18-wheelers just filled.
Yeah.
And if the feds didn't take them, then they became the local prosecutor's responsibility to handle.
McBain was kind of a cowboy, though, wasn't he?
McBain, he's, I love the guy. Still talk to him. He's a judge now. I haven't had the opportunity to be in front of him, but a lot of my fellow attorneys mention, that he's not much different from what I remember when he was the prosecutor.
He can be tough on the sentencing, but he was fair with everything else.
Sure.
But you do your best.
Right.
So you decide to leave there.
I do. Yeah. I spend the years there, and, now at this point, Matthew has been born in 97. Nick has been born in 98. Mina's working in Ingham County. We're living in Delta Township. And I'm like, this doesn't make sense that I'm way down here every day.
45 minutes at least.
Right. And so position opens up in Eaton County, and I go for that. And I end up getting that position, and here I am.
And tell me who you're working for. Jeff Sauter?
Yeah, Jeff Sauter. Jeff Sauter was the longest running prosecutor. And so, he was 10 years in when he hired me, and I kind of worked my way up the chain.
And what year is that?
Early 2000.
Yeah, so you're with Larry Wysocki and Hope Freeman and Mike Egan and...
Yeah, a lot of experience. Neil O'Brien.
Neil O'Brien.
Ends up being my chief,
no
right?
Deal, Neil.
No Deal Neil is there.
What about Eric Matoizik?
Eric Matoizik and Brian Fortino, were the two that left positions. Eric went up to
Ingham County.
Right. And I end up, getting either Brian Fortino's or Eric's position is the one I end up getting with them leaving.
And that's 2002 or 3?
No, that's 2000.
2000. So 25 years.
25 years, yeah.
And you've had some big cases.
I have a couple of them, yeah.
Well, I always say they're all big.
Well, they're all important, right?
Yes. People always say, what are your biggest cases? And I say, they're all big to my clients.
Sure.
And, technically, your client is maybe the people, but you have victims, you have police officers, you have, people that have your cell phone that call you up and want to know what's going on with the case, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And my number hasn't changed ever. It's been the same since 2002 or something like that. So a lot of people have my cell phone. But yeah, we're representing the people, and specifically the citizens of, Eaton County, and those individuals who are the victims. Whatever case you're handling is always going to be the most important thing.
I don't think you and I have ever tried a case against each other.
We have not. I
would remember it if I did.
We have always managed to be able to be cordial and discuss the pluses and the minuses and figure out resolutions to these things.
And I don't think I ever tried a case against Jeff. I didn't know Jeff very well. I mean, he would be in the pretrial conference room once in a while, but not a lot when I was there. But he was always very good to deal with when I.
Yeah, and that's the thing, right, is that, I did one year I did 25 jury trials in Jackson County. So, every other week I think I was doing a trial. And, and I did murder trials there. So when I got up to Eaton County, I had the experience.
Right.
And Jeff immediately put me in as the drug prosecutor, and then we started an economic crime unit in the Lansing Mall.
Right.
And I moved up to begin handling that. And so I did my, fair share of trials, but when it came to murders, fortunately, Eaton County is, a pretty safe place. So murders aren't happening in our county all that often. And if you go into the prosecutor's office, well, the culmination of a career is trying a murder case. So when that occurs, you have different individuals who are like, hey, it's my turn. And, and we had, when I got in, there was so much experience, between all the names you mentioned, and then the young attorneys who want to be involved. And Jeff was a big believer that you bring in two attorneys, a younger one and an older one, so that younger one can learn.
Mentor and
yeah, exactly how it's done. So I never really fought to pick up, murder cases. Instead I focused on, let's make that economic crime unit the best it can be, because
was that one of the first ones?
It was one of the first ones, and it really was a business model. We didn't need to make a profit, but we needed to break even because we were, basically in a sense paying for that unit to survive, and the county government wasn't paying. So Jeff really created it, on a business model, and that's where we moved it from, of helping businesses that were being victimized by people, but with crimes like a bad check, right, that no police officer had time to go out and investigate. Right. So we took those on in order to try to keep people out of the criminal justice system, but at the same point, allow the businesses to be repaid so that they're not going under either from losing the money.
Right. And part of that was important because of the Lansing Mall back then, was a big attraction for people. I mean, thousands of people every day hung out and socialized and, and shopped at the Lansing Mall, went to the movies. It was at the Meridian Mall was basically the same thing. You could go there on a Saturday and see, 50% of the community.
Oh, yeah. I mean, all the old guys from GM, my father-in-law and all his Italian compadres, would all meet up there to walk around. So, yeah, you couldn't walk out into the mall, whether it was a weekday or a weekend, and not run into, somebody that you knew.
And you're starting out there, I assume Berger's there as a district court judge, or no?
Berger's there. I believe at that point that Hansen may have left. Yeah, I think, Hansen had left, but I knew Hansen as a defense attorney, if you remember him.
Yeah, sure do. He was one of the first times I went into chambers with Mike Egan and my dad, and I was just sitting in the back, but it was Hansen, and he really got on Mike.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I mean, they were a different crew, and then Hoffman came in replacing Hansen. So by the time I got down there in 2000, it would have been Berger was still on the bench, and Hoffman were the district courts, and then you had Osterhaven and Evelyn upstairs.
Right, and so, those years, so 2000 to 2012, you really see how an office is being run. I mean, obviously McBain showed you a few things, but every county is different.
Sure, yeah, no, and I really, Jeff really mentored me that way by being able to take over the economic crime unit. At one point, the economic crime unit had as many employees and volunteers, almost as large as the main office down in Charlotte. We were running that many people. And so, you really got to learn how to manage things. And then I kind of progressed where I became Jeff's chief assistant in 08 or 09. And so you really pick up that administrative aspect that you're seeing from the main office of, because a county prosecutor is one of 34 departments in a county. And so you're fighting for the same dollars as the other 33 departments are, for that limited county budget that they have. And so, you really start to figure out, okay, going in front of commissioners, going to their different meetings to try to explain why it's important that the prosecutor has a budget that allows us to actually do these things for our community.
And you've tried some homicide cases.
I have.
How many have you?
I think 4 or 5 that I've been a part of. The big ones that I really, they all have memorance, but that I was really the first chair and spent so much time was back in, it was actually 2010 is when it happened, 2010, 2011, that an individual who was on work release to the Eaton County Jail. So he's already a defendant, but he's out and claims he has a job, which he didn't have. He just roamed the Tri-County area. Actually murdered a retired trooper and his wife.
Right, I remember that.
That took Man, I tried that right before I was appointed the prosecutor in 2013, and that was a 3-week trial, and it was really unique because this guy had, if you remember, the old TomToms, you know, the GPSs that you could type in the address. He had one of those, and when he left the jail in the morning, he'd turn it on to go carouse around the day, and we ended up taking that out to Kansas to the home base for the GPS system. They downloaded it. We had to bring in people from Kansas to testify about it, and it ended up just these breadcrumbs that showed him on that particular day that, you know, where he had started out and him going to the house and how much time he spent at the house and him leaving and then going to the pawn shop and selling some of the victim's goods and, you know, and going to...
Who was the defense lawyer?
It was Bill Weesey and Bill Hankins.
Well, there you go.
They were the two, and they did a great job. The problem is that, you know, murder cases don't go fast.
Right.
You know, if you're really putting the time in, and it really was like 2 years for us to get from the beginning that it happening to the time it was charged, and we spent so much time doing motions because we're bringing in witnesses from Kansas to talk about
expert witnesses, and you got Delbert and the other thing about it is, unlike television, you don't always have a confession.
No.
You don't always have a video. You don't always have DNA, right? You don't always have fingerprints. And it doesn't mean that you don't have a good case.
No,
right?
I mean, that's why, you know it from being a trial attorney. One of the things that the judge always talks about to the jury is that there's direct evidence, which is evidence so we could see like the fingerprints or circumstantial evidence. And, you know, we did have video, you know, we had different things. We got lucky. You know, the officers in that case did a great job of finding him, because if it had been another day, all of that information on the GPS would have been wiped off. It would have just overrode itself.
Wow.
And so the fact that they actually managed to locate this guy, you know, and do what they did, you know, was just amazing.
And you prosecuted that case.
I did.
And tried it.
I tried it, yes.
And I actually watched you do a closing argument. The victim was Abraham, and I knew that family, and I happened to be in the courthouse that day, and I walked in and watched, and you did an amazing job.
Well, thank you.
And it actually kind of made me think, you know, you really got to be careful who has access to your house. I mean, you can't do a background check on everybody, but you can't just assume, even if the person who has access to your house is a good person, you don't know who they're dating. You don't know who they're influenced by, because I think they had a parapro who had a boyfriend who was a pretty bad actor in that case.
Yeah, and that's really what it was, is that she actually was working, you know, at Mr. Abraham's house.
Right.
For his son, you know, helping out his son, really, who lived there with him. And, yeah, and unfortunately they just got it in their mind that, you know, well, these people are wealthy, so let's take, you know, everything we can from them. And Mr. Abraham ends up with a hammer, you know, multiple hammer strikes against the head and ends up dead.
And so, you know, your office is running pretty good.
It is.
I think you brought on some good people, which is not something that, you know, a lot of people think about, right?
No, but you can't run an office. You know, I mean, I'll give you another example. You know, I ended up on court TV for 2 weeks just last year for another cold case murder. Right.
Go.
So I'm out of commission for 2 weeks. I'm in a courtroom. You know how that goes. You run an office. You have to have good people who know how to go, you know, go do their job in the courtroom. And so, you know, my office is really mixed. I've got guys that have been there now, you know, almost 15 years. So
I like Adam a lot. I think he's very good to deal with. Is Chris Anderson still there?
Chris is my chief.
Yeah.
You know, once Neil left, Chris became my chief. So between Chris and Adam and Ryan, those are my three elder statesmen in a sense.
Right.
And then, you know, I have some that are just right behind Ryan as far as their, you know, the amount they've been there. But, you know, whether it's Robin in circuit court or, you know, Brenna, who's doing all my juvenile, I got Kayla, who's a young attorney, that's learning things. And I got Andrea, who's taken now on the responsibility of handling intimate partner crimes. Right. I got another young attorney, Christopher Candela, who has already been to the Supreme Court, I think, like 3 times.
Wow.
That's a rarity, right, to actually get up there.
Sure
but
is.
as my appeals attorney, he's actually getting there. And then I managed to pull a defense attorney over to my side of the fence, Kelly Fletcher, and she runs my economic crime unit and does a fabulous job out there.
Yeah, and they don't teach you that in law school, and that being how to hire, how to mentor. You sort of gotta learn to do that. So you're running an office, you gotta have good skilled people there, right?
Right. Yeah, and you need those legal assistants, right? I mean, they're the ones who are going to keep track of all the paperwork,
and they're good at it to some degree. I think this is my opinion. Some of it has gotten easier. Some of it has got the ability to communicate via email and manage electronically files and be able to send them out via email and be able to track it, that here's the discovery that we gave you, and I don't have to drive out to Eaton County, and that. I mean, it'd be hard pressed for somebody to say, hey, I didn't get this report, right?
Oh, yeah. No, I mean, that's the interesting thing about Eaton County is that Jeff went paperless in 2004. He just walked in and said, in 6 months, you will no longer carry files to the courtroom.
Yeah.
You're going to walk in with a computer. And that's what we've been doing since 2004.
That's amazing. I did it in 2007.
Okay.
And so and some of the staff here thought I was insane. And I said, I'm not doing this.
Right.
I'm not paying rent on this, even though I own the building. I'm not managing all these files.
Oh, yeah. Well, they take up so much space if nothing else. But yeah, so we moved to paperless way back then, and then finally, the systems kindly caught up because 2013, Eaton County was one of the first counties in the state to actually start using their sheriff started using body cam.
Yeah.
So now, but people
made a big difference.
Transparency, yes, but people don't think about the cost of the storage of all that body cam. Or, you take a simple case that, might be a 2-page drunk driving report, that we would have reviewed back in the old days, right? But now 3 or 4 officers showed up and they were there for an hour. Yeah. So now you got 4 hours worth of body cam.
Yeah, you got to review it.
Got to review it. So, I mean, there's only 24 hours in a day, and I've got, I got 8 or 9 attorneys that are just reviewing these cases, and it's hard to keep up because technology is great, but that technology has to be reviewed.
Right. And so, the one thing about being a prosecutor, I think is true, is you don't have a 70 and out, or you do?
70, as far as retirement?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's changed. I happen to fall under the old system. So for me, it was 25 and 55. You could retire and
yeah, but you're not mandatorily required.
No. As the local prosecutor, there's not an age thing and there's not a term limit. thing.
And you've got the office running well, and you're doing your thing, and your wife is retired from Ingham County, and you could just sort of, I'm not going to say escape because there is a lot of liability with every case, but you could just sort of keep dotting the I's and crossing the T's, right?
I could, but that wouldn't be, I wouldn't enjoy that.
Yeah.
If I'm not involved with my office, if I'm not involved with the cases, my office always kind of makes fun of me because I'm not good with names. But if you've given me the facts of a case before, you only have to give me a few words and I'm going to remember that case.
Right.
And so I remember a lot of the cases that are going on in our office because my attorneys talk to me, and and I want to know what's happening in our office, what's happening in our community.
But you're doing more than that.
Right now, I am. You mean
big announcement, right?
Yeah.
You want to not just be Eaton County's prosecutor; you want to be the prosecutor for the entire state.
Well, personally, I feel that I've put our office in a great spot. Great people do great work. And I've looked around at what's gone on in the state for the last 6 years, and I haven't been impressed. I'm a former president of the Prosecutors Association, so I've spent time at the Capitol, just banging my head on the Capitol steps about some of the criminal justice reform that's happened out there. And, and I have tons of support of the other prosecutors that, agree with me on this, but yet I would sit there at these hearings and testify by myself, and I looked around going, where's the Attorney General? These are things that are affecting victims, but yet she's staying silent. And I just, it's time to stop having political activists who decide that they want to be the Attorney General. And actually, let's get back to the old days where, there was an Attorney General who was there for the rule of law. And that's how I've always treated my career, especially as a prosecutor. And so I decided 3 weeks ago, a lot of due diligence beforehand, but I filed about 3 weeks ago today to be the Republican candidate for Attorney General.
Right, and that's a big move because the Attorney General's office isn't just prosecuting.
No, not at all.
It's one of the largest law firms in the state,
if not the largest law firm in the state. Yeah, no, it's that's a big part of it, right? Is the prosecution, because they're taking on the super complex cases, or they're taking on the cases that are going over multiple counties. That's their job. Right. Otherwise, they should be providing support, if anything else, to the local prosecutors. Locals want, they're elected too, so they want to do their job. But if they need support, that's what the Attorney General is for.
And tell me, I think I know, but you can't just put your name on the ballot. Right?
No, not the Attorney General, the Secretary of State, and like Supreme Court justices, the state justice. You have to get a nomination, come out of the nomination convention on both sides of the aisle. Right. They both have to be, whoever the candidate is, was nominated out from just a few. Then there's like 2,200 on the Republican side, and they make the determination who will be their
2,200
delegates is what they're called. We'll go to a state party convention.
And when is that?
It's next August is when it's scheduled.
August of 26.
August of 26. Usually it's held within 2 weeks after the primary. Right. So is when you'll have the primary for governor, and then each side will have a nomination convention at that point, state party convention.
So you've got some time under your belt to lock up those delegates, right?
Well, that's the goal. They're talking about doing a nomination convention in the spring, kind of a preference convention of who they would like. So I figure I have about 7 months to get around the state and introduce myself to the delegates and explain why I'm the most qualified candidate.
And you're able to do that and still practice law.
Well, yes, like I said, great office, but like yesterday, I was in Wayne County last night for a meeting, and I show up looking like this, and I just explained to him I have a day job. Right. And so I'm going to leave my day job and, head right here I was in Belleville, head right to Belleville and, and talk to the delegates there. And
you mentioned your two sons. What are they doing?
Well, my oldest is he's living in Clawson now, and he's engaged to a great woman, Sarah. She's in marketing, and his previous job was buying banks, is what it was, buying and selling banks. Wow. And now he works for a different company doing something similar to that. It's finance. He went to MSU for finance, and what is that? Is that James Madison or
Madison? Right.
Yeah, he was. I don't know if it's James Madison or whatever the business one was. Right. He went to that. And
Eli Broad,
yes, yeah. And then Nick is, Nick took the other route, right? Because Matt, he
was a Michigan State guy, right?
Right, but they both played sports, and then Matt went on to wrestle at MSU. Right. Nick got done with sports in high school and was like, my body's tired. I want to do something else. So he goes to MSU and finds the Bass Fishing Club. So he goes around the country doing collegiate bass fishing tournaments. Wow. Didn't even know it was a thing until, he went to school.
Do what you love, right?
Oh, yeah. And so he's up north is where he's at. He's the He's the manager of a roofing company up there.
That's
and
great.
So, sales manager, overall manager of the company. And so he's using his degrees that way. But in reality, he loves politics. And so he's, getting back into being whatever dad needs, he's going to be there. We were at an event Friday night in Traverse City, and he went with me and, was basically just, able to, lead me. He knew who some of the people were that I needed to talk to, and he could get me, to him where I could then do the talking. And so he's just kind of my do-it-all guy right now, and then I have Sarah helping out as well as Mina. So it's turning into a family affair as far as...
You got to lean on everybody.
You do.
To and it's great that they're pitching in.
Right.
And look forward to a lot of great things to come. Believe it or not, we've made it through an hour already.
Have we really?
Yeah.
Oh, we'll see. You and I have a tendency to talk a long time, though.
You were great. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, not a problem.
Good to see you.
It's great to see you.